A very good morning and welcome to the fifth edition of Build with Shakti. I'm your host Nathasha Singh and this whole webinar is been brought to you by New York. Now I'm assuming कि बहुत सारे हमारे साथ ऐसे participants हैं आज जिन्होंने हमें 4 edition से follow किया है, but I'm also assuming कि बहुत सारे नए faces भी हैं, so for them like a quick introduction. New York is a personal transformation platform. That means कि अगर आप अपनी life transform करना चाहते हैं, अगर आप अपनी life में better होना चाहते हैं, we have got the access to the top mentors and experts. So we become your bridge. ताकि वो knowledge, वो wisdom हम आप तक लेके आएं so that that can help you to change your life. And honestly, Build with Shakti का जो पूरा idea है ना वो वहीं से मतलब उसी intention के साथ शुरू हुआ था. Nathasha Kumar, जो आज who will be conducting this entire webinar, she is the brainchild of Build with Shakti. Nathasha, जो है, she's a co-creator at New York. She's the founder of Maloka Venture Studio, and she's a serial entrepreneur. उन्होंने बहुत सारी companies को build किया है, establish किया है, and turned them into a multi-crore business. लेकिन मैं ना नताशा को थोड़ा एक डिफरेंट लाइट में देखती हूँ. I mean, of course, she's a businesswoman, but she's a very beautiful intersection of spirituality and entrepreneurship. मतलब आई थिंक उनको वो हैक समझ में आ गया है कि हम सबके अंदर एक लाइफ फोर्स है, हम सबके अंदर एक हायर इंटेलिजेंस है, जो कि आपको गाइड करती है, जो आपको बताती है कि कौन सा वो आपको इंट्यूशन देती है, इनसाइट देती है और कौन से पाथ पे जाना है, इस तक को भी वो काफी हद तक डिफाइन करती है. और I think Natasha also knew कि ऐसे और भी बहुत सारे entrepreneurs होंगे. Of course, entrepreneurship does mean hustling, but ऐसे और भी बहुत सारे लोग होंगे जो उस intersection पे कहीं हैं कि हम spiritual भी हैं लेकिन हमें अपना business भी खड़ा करना है. लेकिन ऐसे लोगों के लिए कोई community नहीं थी. And exactly with this intention and purpose, Natasha came with Build with Shakti ताकि हम एक ऐसी community बनाए जहाँ पे ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा ऐसे लोग आ सके where you guys feel heard, seen and supported, जहाँ आप अपने viewpoints हमारे साथ share कर सकते हैं. You can share that how you are building with the whole aspect of spirituality in the picture, right? And I'm so excited because आज के जो हमारे guest है Sameer. Sameer is also a big believer of the consciousness. Sameer is the co-founder and curator at Supermorpheus, which is a startup community and fund based out of Pondicherry. और जैसे मैंने उनके बारे में डिस्क्रिप्शन में भी बोला है that he is a business yogi जिन्होंने पूरा consciousness का algorithm hack कर लिया है and he accessed that inner flow, that higher intelligence at will और जो उनकी business choices में भी reflect करता है बहुत हद तक. So आज का ये जो conversation है ना ये उसी के around होने वाला है. And to be honest, मुझे नहीं लगता इससे better analogy मेरे पास होगी about consciousness in startups that imagine you're driving the car, right? And suddenly the clouds cast, suddenly मौसम खराब हो जाता है. अब आप आगे कैसे जाओगे? Of course you will turn your headlights, of course you'll use your GPS. This is exactly what consciousness is in the whole scheme of entrepreneurship. वो driving car is your business. The cloudy days is actually the changing situations in your entrepreneurship ecosystem. बट वो हेडलाइट जो है जो आप आगे आपको आपका पाथ दिखाएगी, दैट इज व्हाट कॉन्शियसनेस एंड स्पिरिचुअलिटी इज. वो जो जीपीएस है दैट इज योर इंट्यूशन एंड इनर विजडम दैट इज गोना टेल यू दैट व्हाट वे दैट यू शुड बी लुकिंग फॉरवर्ड टू. So I'm very excited and I'm sure all of you are excited to know कि जब companies और founders इस intersection को beautifully utilize करके infuse करते हैं अपने businesses में, तो किस तरीके से आपका business accelerate करता है. But I think one thing that I'm actually looking forward to वो तो हो गया that how we make it profitable. But one thing that I'm really excited to know is कि जब I'm sure ऐसे situations भी आते हैं where you believe in something, lekin there is a very popular opinion which is not favorable to what you stand for. And I'm sure वो हर एक entrepreneur के उसमें आया होगा. So उस time पे आप कैसे, how do you stand strong and how do you say no, being still attuned to your own inner consciousness? So I'm very excited, guys, and without any further delay, I will give this spotlight to Natasha. And yes, Natasha, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Nathasha. And good evening, good morning, I'm sorry. Good morning to everyone. Abhi मैं evening में ही हूँ. Nathasha, if you can help spotlight me and Sameer, that would be great. So, yeah, I mean, thank you so much to whoever is following up with this entire dialogue that we're having on Build with Shakti. This is our fifth edition, or, in the past 5 editions, we have learned and we've kind of explored so much around this whole spectrum, जो conversation जिसके बारे में हम बात करते हैं कि, the whole, what does spirituality and entrepreneurship have in common? Or what does spirituality or creation have in common? It's a wider discovery that we'll collectively have to figure out. But yes, this is the fifth edition. I see many of you are there, many of the old faces also, although we can't see the faces. So yeah, I mean, let me welcome Sameer today. Natasha, I'm sorry, the pin is not on, I see. I think we'll just have to make sure that is done for the video also.
Okay, no, I did pin him. Just a minute. I'll pin him again. Just a minute.
Yep. So Natasha ने आपको समीर के बारे में बताया. I have a very different story with Sameer. It's primarily like जब आप बहुत कुछ ढूंढ रहे होते हो, you're trying to look for a lot many answers, and the universe is like, here you go. That's how I met Sameer. हम इसके बारे में बात करेंगे, but let's all welcome Sameer here. Good morning, Sameer. How are you doing? We'll have to unmute Sameer.
Yeah. Hi, I'm doing excellent, yeah. How are you guys all?
I am doing well. It's a pleasure to have you here, Sameer. I know you're a very chill guy. हम इसको बिल्कुल फॉर्मल नहीं बनाने की कोशिश करेंगे. And we'll try to keep this at your comfort level for sure, because I know you're a very chill person. But there is so much to learn from you, Sameer, right? There are many people in your life, in your circles and in your ecosystem, बहुत silently आपकी life में बहुत important role play कर जाते हैं. And that's the role that you have played in my discovery journey of उसको reassurance बोल रहे हैं या उसको rediscovery बोल रहे हैं, whatever you may call it, right? And context setting के लिए it's बहुत important है कि to share that where it all arised from. When you've been working, a lot of us are entrepreneurs here, a lot of us are creators, a lot of us are serial entrepreneurs here, by the way, who are building multiple businesses, and a lot of us are serious seekers as well. Chahe koi bhi modality ho, we are trying to look for the answers of whatever the vast universe has thrown at us, or we are exploring, right? But at the same time, a material world bhi hai. We are so ingrained in the material world. There are desires, there is ambition, there is comparison, there is so much that we deal with. And in modern society, इस चीज का context बहुत कम लोग दे पाते हैं कि how do we take both and walk forward? क्योंकि हमारे, especially in Hinduism or maybe other religions also, we've had the conditioning कि creation and money is not great. It's not right. अगर आपको धार्मिक बनना है, आपको सात्विक बनना पड़ेगा, you'll have to leave. But as you start diving deeper into it, start realizing कि there is the combination and the whole idea of what is being sattvic, what is being simple, what is, all of this in this the whole spectrum of creating. And I was able to discover a lot of that and learn a lot of that by being part of Supermorpheus, by being around the ecosystem that you have created. तो मेरे लिए वो एक बहुत important, I would say, milestone था, meeting you and of course being part of the Supermorpheus community. So I'm happy you are here today. I do have a lot of questions, but we've trickled down to, certain questions. And why don't we start with your journey, Sameer? आप अपने बारे में थोड़ा बताइए, how everything started for you, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah. Good. So basically, I mean, just a background wise, I grew up in Chandigarh. I did engineering, finished in 1998. Then I was working as a software engineer for about 6 years. I joined a startup very early on as a programmer in 2000 across India and the US. 2004 end is when my sort of next stage of life started with entrepreneurship. I started a startup along with Nandini, who's also my life and work partner. And 2004 to 2000, I think 2.5 years we ran that startup. It got acquired. And then after that, we ended up starting Morpheus and Morpheus Gang, which was a community of founders and a first startup accelerator in India. So my sort of inner journey happened, kind of came to surface, you can say, at that time, because so one of the, I mean, see, one said that you can only understand life backwards, right? But you have to live it forward, right? So when I look backwards at my life, what I find as a trait is that I was always interested in knowing the truth or knowing things behind the scenes. Like even if there was a joke in my family that, when they bought me a car as a young boy, and from the market, I would open it up on the way to see
Yeah.
कि उसके अंदर क्या है, right? So that's a metaphor. If you can see, you have something, you want to break up and see what's there inside, what's there behind the scene. So even as a programmer, I was always looking behind, how an operating system works, how the hardware works, so that habit was there with me. So when I was running Morpheus, as an accelerator, so at that time I used to always wonder about, how entrepreneurs' minds work, right? Why some founders succeed, why some don't, when on the face of it, they all were smart people working in good markets. They work very hard. So it was not very obvious to me, right? So one of those days, I was on a train journey between Delhi and Chandigarh, and I was pondering about the 36 companies which we had worked with, and almost half had taken off and half had not. So I was trying to understand what's the pattern, what are we missing, right? So what jumped out at me was the quality of intuition. Right?
Yeah.
So, and it's important to state that I was a atheist, atheist rationalist person, because that's how I grew up with my dad. So I had no belief at that time or interest in any religion or spirituality. I also was very Western minded in my reading and my exposure. So when I saw intuition, I saw it as a behavior trait where I saw some people, while solving a so-called difficult problem, suddenly see a solution, suddenly see an answer, which has not arisen from the actual linear sort of investigation. Something just dropped in their head, as if from the future, some flash happened, right? So that behavior was there. So entrepreneurs who were able to somehow receive intuition, right, were able to sort of leapfrog in a way, right? They were able to see the future and enter into the future. On the other hand, the ones who continue to apply what we call logical mind, right?
Yeah.
So logical mind, if you understand, is the collection of past data, right?
Yes.
So when you are operating in a situation which is similar to what you have done in the past, right? Of course, your past is going to be helpful. But if you are in a situation which is totally new, different, then your logical mind actually becomes a trap. I mean, that's something I learned as I investigated at that time, because I was also myself totally into logic itself. And startups are by definition projects or tasks or venture where you're trying to go where no other human has gone. So logic actually becomes a trap over the only thing which can help you is intuition.
Yeah.
Right. So when I saw this quality, I was immediately curious to know how it works. What is the behind the scenes of intuition? And being an atheist and scientific guy, I thought I should read more on deep science and research on the mind. And that's what I did for a year or so. I read a lot of books, white papers, talks and all. It gave me knowledge of how the brain works, the neurons, neurosynapses, neurochemistry, but the mainstream science was sort of denying intuition.
Yeah.
Right? But what was happening in my life in parallel was that in my experience of intuition was becoming wider, because I began to see that not only the founders in our portfolio, almost all sort of pioneering entrepreneurs of the world, or pioneering scientists, musicians, any field you take it, if you try to look at how did they come up with their ideas and their work, it's always very mystical. You can think about Einstein, Steve Jobs. So then I said, oh shit, intuition is actually what is pioneering the world forward. Right? And we're living in the world which only teaches us logic. Right?
Yep.
So I sort of really was sort of interested or driven to understand what is intuition. And,
Right.
and that's what I was trying to, and I came to a point where I said, science doesn't know it, but maybe, I can propose a new theory of intuition. Science is always growing.
Yeah.
Right? So I actually began to write a white paper where I was trying to explain intuition in very physical, neurological terms. And that's the time, basically, I ended up in a school. So basically, so you can see so this discovery of intuition sort of sent me into this digging into intuition, right? So that journey, was still on. My daughter joined a school in Chandigarh, which was an alternative school, which was inspired by the education philosophy of Sri Aurobindo. So Sri Aurobindo, for people who may not know, is one of the recent sort of yogis or spiritual giant from India. And he lived in Pondicherry from 1910 to 1950 and built an ashram and an ecosystem. So one of the things they built was a school. In fact, my daughter currently goes to that school and we live in Pondicherry because of that. But this whole journey began in 2012 when we joined the school in Chandigarh. And I ended up reading a book on his philosophy of education. And in that book, at one point, there was a line which said, the intellectual mind can only go so far.
Yeah.
It has a ceiling. To go beyond, you have to access the ranges of intuitive mind. Right? So imagine somebody like me who was writing a white paper on intuition, thinking that I'll get the next Nobel Prize for, suddenly discovering this book. It was a basically turning point of my life. And they had 10 pages on how intuition works.
And what year was this, Sameer? What year was this happening?
This was 2000. So 2011 middle is when I started to investigate intuition. This is 2012 middle, basically.
Oh, okay.
So 1 year later. And 10 pages of very good explanation of how the intuitive mind works. But and now I wanted more, right? Because I was looking at this. So I said, how can I? And there was a line in those 10 pages which says, the only place work has been done to understand and develop intuition is the ancient Indian yogic systems. You see, I was at a point in life where I had never taken. For me, first of all, yoga only meant
the physical
hatha yoga, right? And that also I considered as a outdated form of exercise, which some backward people are still doing. That was my mindset, okay? But the book was obviously indicating a much deeper meaning to the word yoga. And then I remembered that in the front of the book, there were two pictures, which the author had put as his own teachers. One was Sri Aurobindo's photograph, and one was mother's photograph, who was his spiritual collaborator. So, and I understood that Sri Aurobindo gave birth to a new system called integral yoga, right? So that was my only reference, basically, right? So I just took his name, went online. In India at that time, Flipkart was very dominant. And I still remember June, July 2012, I ordered like 5 books written by him. And I began to read whichever one randomly came. So basically, that was my sort of intellectual beginning of the journey. And I think over the next 6 months, I read that book and sort of got an intellectual idea of the framework, which basically is the spiritual frame, which talks about this whole existence of a oneness of consciousness, right? Where basically means we all are actually part of one single consciousness. But we don't realize it But so when I look at physically, you and me, we look separate, right? But if I can realize my larger consciousness, suddenly I get access to data which is not really within my head, but from a vaster space. And that's what triggers intuition. And for a lot of people, like scientists, it happens accidentally. But yoga tells you a way how you can actually make it you can expand your awareness from where you can have intuition flowing through you at will. So that's the journey I began. And Sri Aurobindo's teaching, they don't give you a method or a practice, basically. That's for you to discover, right? So as I was trying various stuff, I ended up meeting this person named Partho, who's actually the author of the original book I read. And somebody asked a question in the chat. So the book is called Integral Education by Partho. You can find it on Amazon. So he was a founder of the school, which we were part of, and he had written that book. So I ended up meeting him with a group of people, and he sort of explained a particular technique of how do you sort of spiritually go deeper into your journey, which is a technique from Vedanta, and somehow those words just stuck into my mind, and for the next few days they just kept spinning around, and at some point I began to try out that practice is generally called known as self observation, in paying attention to your own self. And that also in 2012 all of this happened, and that's when I began my so I tried many practices before that. Nothing really worked. This particular thing worked for me, and that has been my practice till today, to grow in consciousness from that time onward. So that's the sort of I don't know if I went too long, but that's the journey, beginning of the journey, basically.
I mean, it's beautiful context setting coming from, see, the curiosity led you to discover the source of intuition, at least one of the source of intuition, right? Like what I'm really interested in, Sameer, like I remember you started Morpheus, was doing like, again, startup ecosystem was primarily very new at that point of time, and you guys were making moves, right?
Yeah.
But I think you left that cold turkey. I won't say completely cold turkey, but you disappeared for a couple of years after that. I
6
mean,
years.
can you
6
share what happened? What
Yeah,
led you to make that decision?
yeah, see, that was actually a continuation of this journey itself. So what happens in the journey of self-observation or paying attention is that when you pay attention to yourself, you start to see all the conflicts and the noises and whatever has become part of you as a result of whatever personality you are carrying with you. And as things become quieter, you become more aware. Right? So at that stage, and interestingly, this journey happened. So we were 3 co-founders at Morpheus, myself, Nandini, and Sarojit. And it happened to all of us kind of in parallel. And we all in our own way began to discover that, or became aware that the startup ecosystem in 2012, 13 was becoming very commercial, very greedy, where the only thing which mattered was the ability and success of fundraising. How much can you raise? How fast can you raise? How much can your valuation grow? Right? Which meant if you raised money, instead of using it to build your company in a more solid way, you will use it to raise more money. Right? And see, we were the number one accelerator at that point in the country. We had many successful companies. All of them went in that direction. Instead of building deep value as a company, you started to chase this outer metric of fundraising. And of course, that took you to the front page of magazines and all that stuff. So we could not relate to that. So we were at the center of this. See, Morpheus played a very significant role actually in the beginning of the startup ecosystem. We were one of the forces to bring it up, right? So we were pretty well known. We used to get a lot of applications. Everybody wanted shortcut to VC. And that's something which we could not resonate to. Right? We wanted to work with people more deeply, build companies at that stage. So that dissonance became very obvious to me, basically. And see, one of the things which I was taught by my teacher was that once you become aware of your sort of your core consciousness, then what you start to experience is that whatever you do in your life, you do various things. Every activity is either going to shrink you or expand you, right? And the rule is that whatever shrinks you, you either solve it or you get away from it. And whatever expands you, you do more of it, right? So I experienced constantly this shrinking whenever I was participating in the startup ecosystem, meeting founders, visiting Bangalore and things like that. And I could see it. It was a greed and the extreme materialism, And we tried for a year to see if we could create a smaller cohort of companies who are entrepreneurs who want to build companies in a different way. So we couldn't do it. Right. So first was that, can I solve my shrinking by changing something? It didn't happen. So then one fine day, and then see, also you start operating from a certain, what do you say? Basically, you are told what to do from a sort of higher source. In Sanskrit, they call it Adesh. One day it just came that we must shut down Morpheus. And see, we were at the peak of our career. We had raised a fund in Singapore with a large, well-known VC as an LP. Right. So actually, we had to pull out that deal in the middle of happening, because the clarity in our mind was that we need to move out because we can't continue to shrink. Right. And if the ecosystem is the same,
Right.
We should not expect them to change. We should move out, right? So that was, and then, I mean, all we did was call a meeting of our key team members in Chandigarh, which is where we used to live. People came from Delhi and Bangalore, and everybody was on board, right? So we just basically made an announcement
How is
to,
this taken, Sameer? Like, if I talk about, because we're also conditioned to accept that कि अगर आपके पास opportunity आई है, you've been given that opportunity to run the fund, and you're at the peak of your career. What is the mindset that required to say, hey, this is not aligning with me? And how do people around you act to that?
no, no.
Right?
So basically,
So much
see,
hopes are
I
riding on you.
understand your question, right? But depends upon what you want in life, right?
Hmm.
So my quest always, sometime unknown to me, was to grow in consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And Sri Aurobindo is the strongest. I mean, his path is the strongest in that. So, and
Yeah.
and my teacher Partho says that he said, you cannot go to Sri Aurobindo or Mother, they come to you, right? So my belief, if you were to humor me, and yes, for some people it might sound weird, but my belief is that the idea of intuition, the word intuition, how did it suddenly come to my head? Basically, I never knew about it. My
Right.
belief is it was triggered, right? It was a trigger put into my head, which actually led me towards them, right? Because while discovering intuition after a year, I reached, see, because I was very hardcore into science and intellectualism and all, right? But through this
Right.
1 year, I went to the depth of science to find science does not know intuition. Intuition exists in front of me, right? So in a way, without me knowing, my belief, my blind belief in science sort of became weak, right? And
Yeah.
then I read this book, Integral Education, which is sort of a bridge. So basically in that book also they explain Sri Aurobindo's philosophy and then go to education. So it was a bridge for me, right? And then I read his books.
Right.
How there was this step-by-step sort of. So now I was very clear. My only priority in life was growth of consciousness, right? That was my, anything which I'm doing should add into that.
Right.
If it add, that's great. If not, I'm going to move out, right? So if you look from that perspective, the decision was very clear because, and we took 1 year actually.
Right.
Out of 2013, we tried to see if we could find even a small group of people where we could build startups in a more conscious manner. It didn't happen. And 2014, it was clear that the time has come to move out. So there was, in our mind, there was no thought at all. In our close team, interestingly, 5-6 people, everybody sort of caught the virus, you can say. So we moved out. Of course, the larger startup ecosystem was, people, my parents were so surprised. I mean, for 1 year, they kept hounding me. And I was 35 at that time. So who takes retirement from work at 5, right?
Yeah.
And I remember one of the, I mean, I won't take the name, but one of the most well-known names in the angel in VC world, a friend of mine, he called me, he said, why are you leaving? And he used the word, he said, you have coached the national team. Now the time is to win Olympics and now you're leaving. What can I do to make you stop? And I tried to explain him this philosophy, but he was a good guy, but he was working in the mind. It didn't happen. So it was, by the way, it was the front page on Economic Times, North India. India's first accelerator, Morpheus, shuts down, right? So it was a big deal, but honestly, for us, inwardly, we completely lost interest.
Yeah.
I don't know how it happened. It was not which I did it. It was something else which made it happen. In fact, if I were to go backwards, if you were to humor me, so 2000, so when we sold our company in 2007,
Right.
that December weekend, Christmas weekend, we were in Bangalore. We wanted to go for vacation, and somehow we discovered a resort in Pondicherry, right? And we went for a vacation to Pondicherry. We were living by the beach, but I was still in my atheist sort of phase. So I never went to Aurobindo Ashram or Auroville or anything, because to me, these were like bad places, But I still remember being in the moment I came to Pondicherry, I felt some peace came down to me. I felt really peaceful. And to me, the comparison was Goa, the other side where people go for vacation. It was so powerful. And, but see, now, as you know, I'm very connected to Auroville now. And I know that if me and Nandini had gone to Auroville at that time, we would have probably loved it and joined and become Aurovillians.
Right.
Right. But somehow we didn't go there, and we come back to Bangalore. Within a week, the Morpheus idea came.
Right.
First visit to Pondicherry, come back, Morpheus started. So to me, I mean, again, in my own worldview, it was their will that we should go and do the startup thing first, right? Go to that journey, and after that, come back, into Pondicherry, Auroville, all that stuff. So when I look at it, to me now I see everything is sort of very connected, right?
Yeah. It's
And
like Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, right? It's like a typical hero's journey where you had to, take the wounds of everything, go into the undercovers, and then arise back again. Um,
see,
so what
honestly,
happened?
we didn't have in this Morpheus journey, there was no wound. It was all very well because the community was great. People were so lovely. See, economically, Morpheus was very promising. That is why we could move on. We knew
Right.
that our financial needs will be taken care by the exits of Morpheus, right? And
Right.
at that time, we had no plans to come back. We basically thought that, see, I joined a startup in 2000. I left in 2014. I said, I have done enough work
Yeah.
in the startup world. I should now learn something else, right? So from 14 onwards, basically, we just jumped full on into the inner journey, right? As guided by Sri Aurobindo and Vedanta. And we had no plans to come back. And that took us, so we were very involved in my daughter's school, small school in Chandigarh, all that stuff. We just completely disappeared from the startup world. I stopped going to Bangalore. The energy used to sort of get me. And we were on that journey going deeper. And Partho, who was the author and became my teacher, so with him we used to form a small community of people who want to learn Vedanta. And so we started a new community called Oneness. So we were on that journey very relaxed, and suddenly after 6 years, this idea came that maybe an interesting
What's the Adesh? What did it came out as the Adesh from the whatever it is?
It basically, the way it happened was, we actually 2020 end, my daughter decided to quit the school in Chandigarh. It was sort of losing its way, and we moved to Auroville, and Auroville side. We shifted to Auroville actually, because there are many schools over here which follow the same philosophy. And during that period, Partho, he started a publishing house to publish books of this kind, right? And and we met him in December, and he said to me and Nandini that maybe you guys should write a book on consciousness and business. So, so I said, it's a good idea. Let me keep it with me. Let's see when the inspiration strikes. Right? So, 15th of January is my birthday, and in the Aurobindo Ashram there is a sort of a system of birthday meditation. So I went, and it happens exactly at the same time as we're talking right now, 11:30 time. So I came from Auroville, which is about 20 minutes on the bike to the ashram, 20 minutes of meditation and back 20 minutes, right? So this 1 hour, I was very quiet within me, because birthdays are also the time where you can be quiet and sort of receive more. And just during this trip, I received a very strong inspiration to write the book. Not business and consciousness, but startups and consciousness. Because business is a wider field I don't know anything about, but I know about startups, right? And I knew sort of broadly what will it contain, at least to begin with. So in the next 2 days, I just kind of typed out whatever was coming, and one chapter, two chapter, I shared with a few people, and I shared with Partho also, and everybody said this looks fine. Then I also saw the table of content. So none of this was being thought and written, basically. It was just kind of coming down. So over the next 2-3 months, I used to sit under a tree for 3-4 hours every day, and just in the laptop and just typing. In 2-3 months, the book got done. And at that time, there was no plan to start anything. It was just a sort of a idea, But what happened was, actually, then I realized the book itself got its own force, actually. Right? Just in parallel to the book, an idea came with certain group of people that should we do something in practice to merge startups and conscious? Should we run some experiments over there? Right? And 20 of us were in that group. We started to do some work. So that was actually happening in parallel to the book, but I did not know the connection, actually. I couldn't see it at that time. But what the book did was, basically, it gave a blueprint of how these two things can be integrated. Spirituality, consciousness, and startups. And not just as a side experiment where there are five business, actually become a mainstream path to build startups. And the execution happened in this group of 20 people. So eventually these two things sort of merged to give birth to Supermorpheus as a community. See, because when we started with 20 people, we never thought that too many people will be interested. See, because we were also carrying a baggage of 2014 when nobody was interested, right? So But the 20 people grew to 50 to 100, 200. Today we are 1,200, 1,300 people.
Yeah.
I guess something happened during that period, including COVID was there, that the search for consciousness was there in a much wider scale. And hence people sort of joined such groups, right? Because we are very clear about, so we call it, see, there are two kind of people who have the drive to build companies. One is where the drive is ego, from the ego space, where you want to build a company in progress because you want to be big yourself, right? So you want to be bigger, powerful. So when such people grow, they want to grow, they only care about their growth.
Mm.
So when such entrepreneurs grow, you will see that everybody else around them suffers basically.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But that's a ego-oriented founders. Then there are what we call as consciousness-oriented founders. They also have a drive to grow and build something.
Yeah.
Right? But somehow, when such people grow, everybody around them grows.
Right.
So
Right.
because they have a unknown knowledge of interconnectivity of the world and oneness, which you talk about, they may not have realized it, but somewhere they feel that if I'm growing, all my teammates should grow, all my customers should grow, right? So they sort of have this wiring of wider growth, right? So that's what
Right.
we call as consciousness oriented people. Sometimes they themselves don't know, right?
Mm.
So when people come and want to join Supermorpheus, and all of these are referred people, so when we talk to them, that's what we are looking for, the quality of consciousness orientation. See, once you have the orientation, which see I also had in Morpheus, I did not know all this stuff.
Right.
And at some point, then you can probably get into the path of actually developing the orientation into the power of consciousness, which is the spiritual journey, basically, right? But
Yeah.
even before that, you are somehow in that path, right? So what we are doing in Supermorpheus is we are building a community of such people, right? Not every, but community joining doesn't mean that you have to start meditating
Yeah.
tomorrow, right? You still stay as it is, but at some point, if you have the urge to go deeper, that is where, so our oneness community has become a sub part of Supermorpheus, where
Right.
people who wish to deliberately go into that journey, they join there and we go more intense. So that is about 150 people as of now, right? So I find myself, it's very interesting to see 2008 to 14 was the Morpheus period, 6 years. And 14 to 20 was the inner journey, right? And now it's the process of sort of trying to integrate the two.
Yeah.
So I personally find myself very fortunate that, to be able to do two things which I have enjoyed the most, right? And if you have two means you're sort of in a space of double bliss. And to be
For sure.
surrounded by so many good people, friends like you, we are all trying to go in the same direction, right? So that's how the shift happened. So basically,
Yeah. Been such beautiful journey. I mean, the whole thing came together. And even for me, Supermorpheus is, it's like blindly trusting a set of people in a community and say, hey, I know the alignment will be there. Like, for example, me, if I need anybody, um, a little bit about the journey when I kind of came out, right? I was in this whole mental mess and saying, hey, I don't think I'm made for the business world. I feel super guilty for making money. I feel super guilty while, things are going great around in my life in terms of monetary and material wise. I can't see the suffering that's happening around.
yeah.
So I had to go into that cocoon for good 2 years to be able to, say, hey, what's the perspective here? There is a desire that's pulling me to something. And very interestingly, you talked about Adesh. It's a very mystical phenomena that is an internal calling that you get. It's like a spark in your brain, a thought appears
Yeah.
that tells you to do something. And many times we often ignore it. I think we all of us have it, but we often ignore it. But the moment you start surrendering to that voice or that thought that appears, I think beautiful stuff just start emerging. And
Yeah.
something in me, there was this one fine day, I was not going anywhere, and I was invited to this startup event that was happening in Gurgaon, and a thought appeared out of the blue that said, just go. मतलब आज जाना है तुझे यहाँ पे.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'll just go. And I was, at that point, I was in my hermit mode, cocooned. I didn't want to interact with people. And I went, and my friend just brought me to the stage and said, Acha, tum bolo, tum startup word se aati ho, we've done the business. And I was just left, I was left speechless, and I didn't know मैंने business के बारे में बात नहीं की, but I start talking about consciousness and the whole reality of what I was going through. And people were confused. I was also confused. I came out and I met this guy. He said, Natasha, I think you should meet Sameer. And I was like, who's Sameer? And he just gave me thoda sa context. And that's how I met Sameer. The peak of, I would say, confusion. At the peak of that whole space, I still have the desire to build in the material world, but I don't know how to anymore. Because the pull is so strong towards knowing and curiosity.
Yeah. See, when you look at the source of your actions, right? We all see that's why the whole process of paying attention, right? When you look at your action, which is very outwardly, let's say I'm just, like the action happens at a physical level, but there's an intention behind the action in the mind. So if you begin to observe yourself from physical, you can trace it back to the subtle. And you see that there are two spaces from action. One is the spaces where you identify it with the egos, like a separate personality, right? Like I have a narrative, right? I am Natasha, I was born in so and so, I own this thing. So that's a separate person. So that's when one is, so from that space, if I feel like small and incomplete, I want more, right?
Yeah.
But once you kind of commit yourself consciously to the journey, you have to sort of disallow initiation of action. See, there are two phases actually. One phase is where your action comes from your ego, but the outcome is offered to the universe. And this is a little bit of a Gita space, right? Where they say the step one is, what this is, sarv karm phal parityaji, where you basically give up the fruits of your action, right? So your ego personality is still deciding, asking you to do stuff. But you do it, but you sort of keep offering fruits to the universe, to Krishna, right? So what happens is that you break the loop. See, because what is the default loop? My ego wants me to do something and could do it and I feed the result back to the ego, right? So there is an ego flywheel going on, it becomes stronger and stronger. But if the desires are coming, but the fruits are being offered to the other side, right? Then the flywheel breaks. See? And then at some point, the desire system of desire becomes weaker. And you realize that actually a lot of your action itself can originate from a higher consciousness. So you can initiate action from your own individual personality, or you can stop initiating and you just become an instrument. You surrender to the universe. You said, I am there to do your work, and the universe will then initiate action through you. So that's the transition, basically, which is in the Gita, they call Nimitta Bhav, right? Basically, when you become an instrument, then the actions, you honestly, I mean, at least as far as I know, that I had no intention or desire to come back and do one more work in Supermorpheus, either to obtain more visibility, fame, or any kind of whatever you say, more money, right? It was just I mean, I was as an instrument, it just came and happening through us, and that continues to be the case, right? And that does not mean that I have no drive to work. Right? Actually, the drive itself becomes, what they say is, when you come to this point, that's when your true work starts. Right? So that's the journey which we need to go through, basically, because sometimes there can be a fear, which is a misunderstanding, that if I don't have desire, then I won't do anything. There is because what happened was, see, there was a phase in Indian spiritual history when there was a Buddhism as a dominating idea. And then after that was Shankaracharya's Mayavad, right? Both of them say that the world is sort of an illusion. So give up the world and go into the higher state of moksha, right? So both of those philosophies lead for people to drop their worldly life, their action, and go out, right?
Right.
And many of us are scared that I don't want to do that. I mean, I want to be in the world, right? So that's the dilemma. But if you look at it, sorry.
And that's what that philosophy has trickled down through our parents and generations to be able
but
to.
you see, but if you go pre-Buddha, you will see the Vedic period. You will see the period of the Gita. But the Gita does not ask to give up work. He actually tells Arjun that there is no way you can give up the war. You have to fight. Right? So that's the complete, where you basically become a channel. Ultimately, what he says in the end, right? He says, Sarva Dharma Parityaje. Give up all dharma, just become my instrument.
Right.
So that same thread was picked up by Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo, who said, actually the best men in the society are the ones who go through a spiritual transformation, and they need to come back and work in the world, right? Or they need to stay in the world, so that if you are operating from a higher consciousness and you are also running a business or a cafe, right? That consciousness begins to flow back into the world, so that that's the complete cycle. See, if you had an opportunity, uh, let's say we were all trapped on an island, right? I mean, we were all sort of living miserably, and you had an opportunity and you just escaped for yourself. You see, all of us are still trapped. That's what is the moksha, right? But if you could bring your higher knowledge, educate everybody else, whoever wants to be, and look at a collective moksha, right? So that's a longer path, of course, right? To transform. So, but the true calling of the Vedic philosophy, or the Gita's philosophy, or Sri Aurobindo's philosophy, is to stay in the world, but operate from a higher consciousness, which is a more difficult thing to do, of course, right? It's easy to say, why don't I just leave everything and go back and go into the mountain, right? But can you live in Gurgaon or Bombay or anybody else, and still, where you're surrounded by the peak of material energies, right? But still embody a consciousness which is working from a different space? Can you still be part of the startup ecosystem and build companies? Can you still have relationships which are with your parents and family and kids, right? So that is where you bring transformation down into the earth plane, right?
Yeah.
So that's a much more hard call, but that's, I think, in the current sort of time on yoga, that is what is required, and I see it happening with many people. So that's the path which at least I got initiated into, where you don't leave anything, you continue to be, and you sort of transform your own reactions. So today, like one of my early sort of, what you say, progress in my journey was that I stopped getting irritated while driving in traffic.
Yes, you must share.
Right?
That's
Because we
that's
all
my
get
one observation. That's the trick that I still use. Not trick, like observe. Please go ahead.
Yeah, no, nothing, because that's such a common thing, right? I mean, we all get so irritated with traffic, and traffic is only growing worse, right?
Yeah.
But it's been 10 years, 2012, that was my first breakthrough. Till today, it's been very hard for me to get irritated, no matter how people are driving, right? That's what basically you get free from the getting hooked into the world around you. You can still stay calm and deal with the world. And then you act from a different space altogether. You can write, you can work, you can cook. In every action, you can bring it a sort of a different energy into your life. Like I was going to have the call today, right? And I am sitting in my room, and there was a certain mess. So I could not join the call until I clean the mess. Now nobody's going to see, it's behind the screen. It's not going to come in the camera, right? But it's just that your own, you just want harmony for the universe. Whatever is in your control. If I can sort my table, sort my things, even though nobody's going to look at it except me, right? So I'm not doing it for anybody else, right? So you just can't tolerate disharmony. I can't throw my phone. I feel that I'm sort of disrespecting the object, because otherwise in the normal world, right, the phone is a non-living thing. Doesn't matter, you can throw it, right? I can't leave my bed sort of crumpled.
True.
It's so, and similar things happen to you when you deal with people, or you are doing tasks. So it's a very different space of action, and very joyful, and what do you say, effortless also.
Sameer, you have had the opportunity to, of course, Supermorpheus has panned out into like a fund now, yet again. You guys are funding some of the really new age startups that are emerging, right? Avishkar is one good one. Zip is one good. What's your take? Like, what's your idea of a new age conscious startup? What are the key, if you can just break it down, what are the key pillars that are needed? And because there are a lot many entrepreneurs here that are starting up, that want to start up something of their own. What are the key things that they need to keep in mind while building? Not from a state of, okay, mujhe business khada karna hai, funding lani hai, but from a state of, if I'm doing something, if I'm creating something for the world, what are the key parameters I need to keep in my mind while building a conscious?
I mean, if you truly want to build a conscious startup, you cannot build it from your mind. If you define mind as the mental instrument which we all carry, right?
Yeah.
Because mind is a hard disk which stores all your past experiences and all the influences of your society.
Yeah.
Right? So by default, mind can only continue the past pattern.
True.
If you wish to actually, consciousness is some from higher plane, right? So you need to actually work on yourself first, and to a certain degree silence your mind.
Mm.
So step one is always to work on one's own self, look at one's own self, observe, attend, and become calmer, right? See, because the calmer you become, the more the higher layers can work through you.
Mm.
So,
True.
so that's what, so basically, so conscious startups are the startups which are being built by people who are somewhere in that journey, who somewhere have that connection of allowing
Mm.
something to seep into them, right? And
Yeah.
conscious startups are not defined by what product and services they build. They can be building, like Avishkar builds robots, right?
Right.
Somebody might be running a restaurant, somebody might be, solving some major problem of energy or e-commerce, whatever, doesn't matter. The
Yeah.
quality is really in the people. So I mean, for example, Tarun, who's the founder of Avishkar, I mean, I've known him for 15 years, right? So as I said, these are people who are hungry for growth, okay?
Mm.
Inner growth, personal growth, but they also don't want to grow alone. They want to grow with everybody.
Yeah.
These are people, when they grow, everybody around them grows. What does that mean? The team grows, the customers grow, right? So that's their compass. So a conscious startup is a startup in which if you go into the team, into their office, you will somehow feel there is a positive energy. Everybody is growing, right?
Yeah.
In an unconscious startup, and there are many of them in India, which are very large right now. And my brother, he's also an entrepreneur. He was asked to join one such popular unconscious startup. I won't take the name, where the founder is known for like being very, very egocentric, very powerful, very aggressive, right?
Mm.
And my brother spent 2 months in that office and he quit. He says it is absolutely, it sucks your soul basically.
Mm.
Because everything over there is driven by this one guy who's sitting on the top and he wants to push everybody around, right? So everybody's suffering over there. It's like you're in a sickness ward basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, I mean, it's too depressing. He just left it.
And
Even
that too
though
is
it was getting paid but on the other hand, see, and now this startup. So now what I'm saying is there can be two startups, both in edtech.
Yeah.
One will be driven by ego and aggression. One can be driven by beauty. Like I met a edtech founder in Chandigarh, conscious guy. Okay, but he says my only job is to fulfill the dreams of my students.
Mm.
Just look at the beauty of the simplicity of the idea, right? He says my only job is to fulfill the dreams of my students.
Yeah.
If I can fulfill them, I will do well economically, because ultimately he's selling courses, offline center, right? If students are happy, they will pay, they'll bring their friends.
Yeah.
And if you extend that and you say, my job is to fulfill the dream of my students and my teammates and my vendors and everybody else around me, and that's what gives me joy, you will see that immediately you become a conscious founder, basically, right? And see, I mean, if you look at, I mean, just giving life of my own life, right? I felt that my job was to help founders fulfill their dreams of building companies, right? That is what motivated me to go deeper into how entrepreneurship works. Hence, I discovered intuition. And I realized that if I want to tell people how to be intuitive, I have to know it first myself, right? So I had to grow myself into the journey of which, by the way, took 8 years, right? 2012 to 20, before I could even come back and tell anybody how to do it, right? So if you want people to grow, you have to grow yourself. So it becomes a growth flywheel of a sort, right?
Yeah.
So you have to look at from an inner working and inner qualities of a startup. And now in this framework, you can fit in any outwardly. It can be an edtech, it can be a fintech, it can be a founder. That doesn't matter, basically, right? And these people are also there for the long arc, basically. So they are not there to succeed and become popular in 2 years. So there is no external motivation. It's an internal motivation that I should grow inwardly, and people should grow inwardly, and we should genuinely create value in the world. And then you can pick any believe me, any startup idea. You can make laptops, you can make bags, and we have all kind of companies in our portfolio doing all kind of work, basically. But the culture is there of conscious orientation. And
Yeah.
if a startup founder can become conscious, then see, imagine if you feel a oneness with people, right? Then the way you would do things will change. You will not do transactional work.
Yeah.
Right? You will not hire people just because you can give them low salary and extract more work.
Yeah.
You will want to hire people where you can give them fair value, and you will want them to work fair. So everything else gets infused with consciousness when that's what you carry inwardly, right? So what I want to say is that people should not look for a formula. Here is the playbook of conscious startup. I should do this. That won't work basically. You need to work on yourself, and then you will see the formula, what you need to do, because every startup is unique, every situation is unique. There is no one thing which can be done at multiple places.
Yeah, yeah. I think the biggest problem statement that I also see quite often, and I saw that within myself also, you very rightly said कि conscious startup is not about the idea of it, because मेरे दिमाग में भी ऐसा होने लग गया था समीर that oh, I have to do good. Okay, if I'm into fashion, I need to make sure that how do I completely solve the supply chain, you know. I don't want to do fashion anymore because it's, you know, polluting the world. Hence I chose to step away from fashion. It was a very weird thing, and for the longest time in my mind it was like, okay, how do I look for a conscious idea?
Yeah, yeah.
Into realization that it's not the idea, it's the way you operate things, right? It's the way you operate with people, it's the way you operate, take certain decisions. You can still choose to be in fashion, and how can you lead from a very different state of your consciousness? That has to evolve.
Absolutely. In fact,
Uh,
one of my friend has a startup in Chandigarh called Malcons. He's also part of the gang. So, they source, organically grown, organically dyed material.
right.
And so recently, I ordered I asked him to make a garment for me specifically, and it was very good. I really like. I said I want to buy more. So he said $1,000 a piece. So now normally in the world that costs 200 rupees, okay, 200-300 rupees. So I felt it is too high.
Mm.
So when I met him next time, I said, "How do you do the pricing?"
Yeah.
So he said the garment which we used is one of the finest garments in our collection,
Yeah.
and they pay 20,000 rupees a month to the tailors,
Mm.
which you would know that it's a very high wage, because typically tailors get paid low, and
Yeah.
they don't make them work 14 to 18 hours. They make them work only 8 hours, and they have given them a space which is air conditioned and everything. And
Yeah.
in fact, one of their tailor is a guy who they found who was like in front of their house in Chandigarh, Mohali. There's a park. They found somebody. He was walking around, and he saw a guy sitting with a sewing machine and doing some work over there. It was basically a tailor who had no work and no job. So he was taking work, and sometimes they come into a gully and they ask houses if you have work, they'll sit outside and do. Okay. This guy went and met him. He saw his craft. He was a craftsman who was struggling. So he said, "Why don't you join us?"
Yeah.
Now that guy was like, he's been out of job for such a long, he has felt the cruelty of the world. He couldn't trust basically, right? So it took him a few days to get him to trust and move into their house. And now he's a tailor. He works he even wrote a blog about it, right?
Yeah.
And this guy is a craftsman. He said, "I will not use a fully automated machine."
Mm.
So they had to get him a semi-automatic machine. And
Right.
he's the guy who works slow and he makes my garment, right? So
Mm.
give me the breakup. I could understand this is worth 1,000 rupees. And I
Right.
said, okay, now I understand. I want 5 more, right? So that, and they are not in a hurry to sort of grow, because he has another business which gives him money. Very slow and steady, trying to give people, and it's a great thing. I mean, like because you can bring, you can bring prices down by exploiting. You can lie about your fabric. You can pay people less. You can do all kind of ghapla, but
Yeah.
so it takes, and so then it grows slow, but he's very conscious about it. And as you said, I mean, conscious fashion, why not?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Sameer, you meet with so many founders, investors, executives in the entire ecosystem, right? What trends are you seeing change? Are people more, and where is this question coming from, right? ये ना dilemma हो जाता है लोगों का. The dilemma is big. Majority is hungry. And I kind of really dwelled on that where is it arising from? We as Indians, or maybe worldwide also, it drives from lack. It drives from हमारे पास कुछ नहीं था, अब हमारे पास कुछ है, तो let's just grab everything that we can right now. And that's what's happening in the ecosystem, startup ecosystem, everywhere. There is a massive FOMO that's being created. I deal with it on very personal level, where I'm like, um, you've done XYZ, and the whole idea of entrepreneur fame, the whole idea of, really making it big, really looking cool. Every youngster or every person who want to get into a startup is being drive from that whole idea कि अच्छा अगर मैं startup बना लूंगा मुझे funding मिल जाएगी, I'll be on Shark Tank one day, and this is how cool I will look, I will be seen with celebrities, I'll go on Cannes red carpet.
Yeah.
All of that will happen, and that driving is coming from a place of, okay, I want to look alike.
Yeah.
And then here there is an ecosystem that is being created that says, hey, let's just grow together.
Yeah.
From a third point of view, this looks like lack and tough, right?
Yeah.
A normal eye. What's your take on this?
See, now this is the state of human nature as of now, and human nature does believe its first identity is I am separate, right? And there is then fear of separation because you can get killed in a very sort of jungle way, but in a urban setting you need more to survive and thrive. And so if I'm separate, then I must compete. If I'm separate, then I must compare, right? So that gets put into us in our mindsets, like even before you are born, actually, even in the conception stage. So that hyper competitiveness is there, and it's a global thing. It's not a India, every different. So in that's the culture which most of us grow up in, and hence and that is reinforced at every stage. You look at the startup media, all the stories are all about these kind of success, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's being reinforced at every level, in every media, everywhere. Shark Tank is all about that, right? So naturally people, but each human being, by the way, has both tendencies. We have a tendency to identify with our ego and go to that path. And we have a tendency to identify with the oneness within us and go into that path, right? So that really depends upon, the growing environment or whatever else it is, right? But there are people. So what I saw was that there are enough people, by the way, who are oriented with consciousness. So when they come to the startup ecosystem, they are rooted in that space. Now, what happens is that who do you want to meet when you want in new, right? You want to meet investors or you want to meet successful entrepreneurs, right? Now, all of them are majorly from the ego orientation. So you get the signal that my current configuration is not right. I need to adopt ego configuration. You feel very weird about yourself, right? So what happens is to one of the two things. One, either people flip into the ego paradigm because they want to be entrepreneur. They have the urge to build, and they say that, okay, this is the only way I'll switch over. Right? Or they say that this is too aggressive a place. Let me just go back and do something simple. Like, for example, my dad was he was a civil engineer who did not join PWD or any kind of government job because he knew that you need to take bribe over there. Because in the, all of his friends joined and they became big officers. Right? My dad joined a job in Punjab Engineering College where there was no corruption at all. Right? Now, he had a flat career. And because he could see that in the public life, you need to have that thing. So he lived a flat life. Right? So that's what people do. They say, okay, this is not for me. Let me go back and just live a simple life, right? But there is a third option where, as a conscious oriented person, you can be part of a community. Or see, that's what I'm saying. If there is a community of similar people, then you will not feel alone. Then you will, within the community, there will be people who would have reached a certain level of progress and success, and they are your proof that even from this path I can build my companies, right? So that is why it makes sense for such people to stick together, right? Help each other, and at least what we should do as a community is also build a counter narrative. It means, like, we are personally trying to start a podcast on this space, that where you interview founders who have taken the path of consciousness and still built what would look like a very impressive. Because to me, there is no your chances of success don't reduce by consciousness; they actually increase. What we don't know is when people start to build a startup from a space of emptiness and they want to be very aggressive, 99 out of 100, they collapse actually on the way. But in media, we see only one. But on the path of consciousness, 100 out of 100 will reach. I know personally many people who can be qualified as successful, materially successful, and they are on the path of consciousness, just that nobody talks about them, nobody knows them. Because by nature, they are not going to be going to blow their own trumpet. They don't go, to Twitter or LinkedIn or anywhere else to talk about, that how, look at how cool I am, right? But they are happy to talk in smaller settings. See, because I'll tell you one thing, like I was in two minds even to come for this talk or not. Right? Because I've gone for talks in the past where people invite you for the right, so they'll say the right things, but when you actually go to the session, it's still the same thing, Missy, right? So then you say, why to waste my time? Right? So I know that many people with consciousness, they would have gone to some public forums and everybody is looking for tips to succeed, right? Then they say, why bother, right? But if there were ecosystems of consciousness, then such people are willing to come out and talk about it. And then slowly a narrative can be built, right? So because a young person, when they come out, they need to see there is another path to succeed. Wanting to be successful is nothing wrong with it. What's the path? Right? If there is no alternative path which is visible and possible, then the only path is the path of the ego. Right? But the other path is followed by a lot of people. So our sort of, if you say the dream in Supermorpheus is that in the next 10 years, if we can help create, 10 companies which are publicly known as successful companies, but inwardly conscious, right? So because see, ultimately the game is of role models. You see, why do we follow certain path? Because we look up to somebody who we want to become, right? If I my daughter is 15, she'll be inspired by some singer, some celebrity, right? She wants to become that, right? So that's the inspiration. So if there are no role models who have succeeded materially in the path of consciousness, then why would our young people follow? Right? So those role models need to be created. For each, you need support, you need capital, you need hard work, you need methodology. All of that is there. And I believe that it's happening. I mean, in the next 5 years, you will see 5-10 years, you will see the conscious startup as a very viable path to mainstream success. And there is nothing wrong with success. I personally have nothing against people wanting to live good lives and have good phones and live a luxurious life. All of that is fine. I mean, that I don't subscribe to this idea of asceticism.
Yeah.
You need to live a full life, but you live in a very conscious manner, basically.
True. All life is yoga, it's like a very simple sentence that says.
Yeah, that is one of Sri Aurobindo's master sentence. All life is yoga, absolutely.
Whatever I end up doing or creating, it is a part of my yoga.
Yeah.
And thank you for advocating for that, many times people think, okay, if it is consciousness, because also you have to be with the right people, right? You'll have to create with the right people, because people who don't end up getting you, and then it's very easy to label somebody who's trying to take decisions from a conscious standpoint, saying, Acha, he's too emotional for the world, or you get labeled very easily that way, or ye bade dil se kaam karta hai. We need more examples of people who've been able to say, hey, dil se kaam karna doesn't mean weak. There is logic attached to it, but there is so much that is coming from the space of.
Actually, the true strength only comes from within. I mean, when you get to that point, nobody will feel you are a weak person. I mean, Sri Aurobindo, he was a freedom fighter. He was the supreme freedom leader of freedom movement in India. The British used to call him the most dangerous man in India, the man who never smiled. They were scared of him. And because that strength which you carry from intensity, that is very powerful. See, another thing I wanted to say that many people in our startup or corporate world, when they genuinely want to grow from inside, right, they end up doing this thing, some kind of static meditation. Because that has been, by the way, that meditation, which is to sit in a room, and it is part of the ascetic world. Basically, it came from the Buddhist Shankara way, right? It leads people to believe that the only way to get peace is if I close my eyes and sit in the room. It never allows you to bring that dynamism of inner dynamism to the world, right? So this is a very misunderstanding. So meditation in Hindi we call dhyan. So the true meditation is when you can pay attention to yourself, dhyan avastha, right? And that can be done in whatever activity you do. In fact, the true meditation, at least as per my tradition and teacher, is when you are able to be aware of your action in yourself while living your day-to-day life, while doing your actions. You could be driving a car, you could be doing a meeting, you could be negotiating a deal, right? Because if you are able to see what happens when you pay attention, you are able to see the noise and the conflict within you, right?
Yeah.
And if you can remove it, it uplifts the quality of your action.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
what we need is more and more dynamic meditative consciousness is the practice which we need. Because if you look at today, I mean, all the popular gurus from past and present, I mean, the ones which are popular right now in India, or the apps from the West, right?
Yeah.
They are all teaching static meditation, right? And it's a 1 hour, half an hour, but you will not, so many people who have been meditating for 1 hour a day for 10 years, but once they come out of the room, their behavior is the same, right?
Yeah.
So what we need is a new understanding of meditation, which is basically, it is to be in the state of meditativeness. No matter what you are doing, you are aware of yourself and you are able to operate from a higher space of consciousness, right? Just because things become difficult in the world doesn't mean that you go back to your ego state.
Yeah.
Can I be in that state even when I'm doing fundraising or investing in startups or driving my car or doing all kind of stuff, right? So that is something which got lost or
Yeah.
sort of hidden. We had that practice. That's the real practice. And see, it's also hard practice.
True.
Half an hour a day is not that difficult to do, right? But when you want to truly observe yourself, it can look challenging. But once you get a hang of it, so that's another thing which we need to realize, that a true meditation is to be in that avastha of dhyan, no matter what you're doing, and to work towards that.
And you talked about, Sameer, the observer self, right?
Yeah.
You primarily very heavily advocate on that. And I've gained a lot of, my quality of thought and being has grown by slowly developing the observer self. For all of us here, can you guide us to how do we get this started? How do we get the observer self kick started from that state?
See, first
What's
of all, you made a very good statement that quality of your thought and emotions have become refined after observation, right? So, see, I'm sure all of us are good at certain things which we do in life, right? How do you improve anything? Let's say I'm looking at this table in front of me, right? If I wish to organize it better, I need to pay attention. I need to observe.
Yep.
I mean, even in life, mundane things, right? If you want to reorganize something, if you want to refine something, you have to look at it, right? So observation is always required, even if you wish to dress well for an occasion tomorrow, right? You have to observe yourself. What's the occasion? What's the weather? How am I feeling? What is my body type? What colors will look good? What will have a contrast? All of that, right? So first of all, we need to realize it's an obvious thing which we don't see it, but observation is part of the process of refinement, right? So that's first thing, right? Second thing is, we do observe, but we observe outwardly when we observe limitedly. But if I wish to go back to my own core and observe myself, that will what lead to self-refinement, right? So self-observation of your own self, right? And see, the main thing which we need to observe is the mind itself. Because see, all of us, we have two hands, right? Most people. So if I were to do some task which cannot be done with two hands, but need three hands, let's say you need to lift 3 suitcases. You will immediately tell me that I can only lift 2 at a time, right? Why? Because you know very clearly that what's the capacity of your physical body, right? But while we know our physical body reasonably okay, we don't know at all the capacity of our mind. For example, multitasking. If you really think of it, it's a myth, basically. No mind can multitask. You see, you can do one task because your attention can only be on one thing. If you doing two things, what you're doing is you're switching your attention between the two. So you're doing one thing only at a time, right? So there is so much, but with our mind, we try to do things which are not possible, but we keep making the same mistake, but we don't understand our mind, right? How do I understand my mind? By becoming conscious of how my mind works. Right? So self-observation or table observation, right? Whatever you wish to improve, you need to observe, because observation will give you understanding. Understanding will tell you what to do, right? So if I want to improve myself, which is, see, when we say myself, what does it mean, right? Every person, if you see, we all have three sort of aspects. One is the physical aspect, my body, right? How do I sit? How do I walk? How do I breathe? How do I eat? All that stuff, right? So that's the first awareness. That can I become aware during my day of the state of my body and how does it change? How does it move? Number one. Number two, the mind. The mind is the thought and the mental machinery which we have, right? Thinking, ideating, imagining, rationalizing, logic. It's all part of the mind. Third is the what is called as vital emotional being. See, because we also get very emotional. Sometimes you feel excited, sometimes you feel scared, sometimes you feel very ambitious, right? These are all in the third category. So these are the three sort of superimposed aspects which are there within ourselves, right? So if I can watch myself, I will begin to see how my personality operates. And the easiest thing to do, because if you look at your day, you'll see that the day is made of activities.
Yeah.
Right? You wake up, you go to the loo, you come out, you drink tea, you drink coffee, you join a session. So we are sort of, so if I can pick one activity of my day, which is a simple activity, not a very complex activity, a simple activity which I do daily, but I do it alone, which could be, driving to office, which could be having a cup of coffee, which could be taking a bath, which could be going for a walk, any of that. And in that one activity, I become aware of myself, which means I'm able to see, observe my body and changes in my body. I'm able to see my mind, which is the thought mind, and my emotional state. And I just try to be aware of these three things, right? So it takes a 10-15 days to get a hang of it. And as an observer, you want to not get involved. So you are just observing. You're not going to analyze. You're not going to judge. You're not going to tell the mind what to do. You're just going to watch as if it was happening on a movie screen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So slowly you start to get a hang of observation, which is neutral observation, which takes 10-15 days. And then you begin to observe. The observation leads to sort of you start to see layers and layers behind your own behavior. And once you see, then you start to see the gaps in your own personality. And for example, I mean, just to give you an example, right? When I was observing, one of the activity I observed was eating. And so I would try and become observant of whenever I was eating. The first thing which was obvious to me was I had a list of things I like, things I don't like. So whenever I had an option to eat something which I like, there was an excitement in me, right?
Yeah.
And whatever I don't like, if I would not eat, but if I had to eat, I would be sort of very, grumbly about it. Right? So that was the first thing I saw. And then observation means when you see something, you don't do anything. You just keep watching. And slowly I saw that this list of, let's say I like paneer, I like aloo, I like rice, but I don't like, let's say, tinda and kaddu. So, but I could not see that if there was a medical or nutrition or some kind of a scientific basis for it. Like does the world believe brinjal to be a poisonous? That was not so, right? So I kind of began to see that there was no foundation on which my choices were resting. They were baseless, basically, right? It was simply some preferences from some childhood experience which had got stuck to me, right? The moment I saw that my current choices were baseless, in literal word, right? Those buildings just collapsed. Right? And the voice came from within me. Today onwards, I eat everything. Right? And the one person who took hardest to adapt to that was my mom, because my mom was used to always making something else for me. When let's say if there was kaddu at home, she will always make paneer, right? So she kept asking for 3 years, are you sure you will eat this thing?
Yeah.
Right? So then what happens is that if you are not carrying pre-programmed preferences, then how do you choose? Like I used to go to a restaurant in Chandigarh where I observed and found out I was ordering the same thing for 10 years. Every time I went, black coffee, Mexican omelette. 10 years. And I didn't know, of course, right, that I was just repeating mindlessly. But when I came to know, it was very embarrassing. So the next time I went to the restaurant, now the same choice came in my head, right? But I sort of used my will to say, no, I will not have this. So I asked for the menu. So even the waiter was surprised because he was used to me just getting the same thing, right? So now I'm looking at the menu and I'm simply scrolling through the, like visually looking and waiting for an inspiration to strike, spontaneous inspiration. And it took me the 3 reading. At the 3rd reading, I suddenly, something clicked. And I called the guy and I said, please bring me this, right? So now I don't remember it because that day I decided not to try and memorize and record my eating experience so that I can repeat or not repeat next time, because that's what we do, right? So and that day, the first time, so when the coffee came, I still remember that time, the cup came and I put my hand to hold the cup, right? I could see, first of all, I could feel the movement of my hand and how your arm and your fingers go and grab a cup, like this, like you grab a cup, right? And then I felt the surface of the cup, like it was round. Now, it might seem obvious, but see, I had not felt, directly experienced the surface of a cup. I always knew in my mind conceptually that a cup is round. But directly knowing in real time, roundness, cup was round, cup was hot, and the cup had a sort of a rough surface. Right? And then I could see my hand, how it came, the cup, and tilt, and how coffee was flowing, drop by drop from the cup to my lip, to my tongue. I could sense the whole thing, and it went to my stomach. And you know what came into my head? Oh shit, I never had coffee before. I had never experienced coffee in its sort of direct form, right? So this is so observation is like where your attention becomes extremely sharp. There is no distraction in your mind. You're not thinking of the next meeting which I need to go to, right? Or the next food I need to chew, or remembering this thing. You just come. And when I ate food, I could feel each ingredient. Right? So your experience sort of becomes very HD in nature, right? Which also means that if you are eating something which is not suitable for your body, you would get to know in the first bite, basically. So there is no way after this happens that you can go and drink Coke every day or eat McDonald's every day. It just drops off. Right? Because your own body will tell you with that attention that this, I'm not really happy with this, right? Once in a while is different, but you can't. So all of your habits of whatever, fast food, wrong eating, wrong listening, they all just get cleaned up. Simply because by paying attention, by being observant, you become very sensitive. Right? Whatever in you, because what is happening is we are just carrying habits from before. Sometimes we are just doing action because we want to look cool to others. So you can't, for example, after this happens, you cannot dress up because you want to look cool to others. You will always dress up in a way which looks good to you and feels good to you. Right? So everything will just begin to change. And it's a slow process, but it's a very fun process. Somebody asked this question, what's the difference in observing and knowing? I mean, when you begin to observe, you just observe, and over time you begin to understand and know, basically. So observation is, you can say, path to knowing. And there comes a time when observation and knowing become simultaneous. In the beginning, there will be some lag in the two, but there comes a time when whatever you say, you start knowing it over time. But this knowing, see, the knowing is of two types. One is the intellectual knowing. Let's say I read a book which says, how does a car work, and I read about it, or I see a video, right? That's an intellectual knowledge, right? That's one type of knowledge. Second type of knowledge you get when you open a car and tinker with it and start to learn with your experience. So experiential knowing. So see, because observation, just what I said, right? That's the first day I had coffee, right? So observation brought me to experiencing coffee, right? And the experience of coffee is what gets me to know the coffee. So observation leads to experience, direct experience. And that direct experience itself is knowledge, basically. So these are all, if you see, it's a continuum of sorts. But what was happening all my life before that, I never observed, I never paid attention to my act of drinking coffee. And hence, I never really experienced coffee properly. And of course, if I didn't experience, I did not have any direct knowledge of it. So I hope that answers, Aniket.
Fundamentally, we all, it's such a mass phenomenon of saying, be present. be present, be
Yeah.
present, right? A lot of us, जब मैं सुनती थी मेरे को ऐसा लगता था कि how do I be present? Like I used to put out the quotes and say, okay, be present. But one is that you know, one is that you truly know how to be present.
Yep.
And observation of this technique of observing yourself, doing one act on one singular day, slowly leads you to get into that state of being.
Absolutely. So the only practice you can do is observation or paying attention. As an outcome of that, you will start to be present.
Yeah.
Like I talked about driving, right? My first activity. So I paid attention to myself. And through that, I got to know wherever my mind was getting distracted to. Right.
Yeah.
And the distractions got resolved one by one. So in a month or so, because the distractions went away, I began to be in present while driving my car. Right.
Yeah.
And that is when I started to experience, the trees in Chandigarh and the birds. And believe me, I was 35. I lived in Chandigarh all my life.
Yeah.
But except my childhood, as an adult, I never knew. I never experienced the trees. Trees were as if not there for me. So being in present, you just become one with the whole, whatever is around you, right? You can see the flowers, you can see the birds. Suddenly the expansion happens, right? And that's the joy, right? I mean, expansion of consciousness. You feel so one with everything else. So that driving was my only period of observation, and that became my favorite time of the day because I always felt very expansive out there, right? So mindfulness or being present is an outcome of the act of observation through which you know your mind and you sort of clean your mind, you remove the noises, you smoothen out the bumps, you get out of conflicts. And if you have no conflict, you're always in the present.
True. And in the context of it not just positively affects your quality of thoughts, your quality of life. Somebody just sent me a direct message that what is the point of doing all of this, right? The point is, the way I perceive it, the point is very clear that if there is a desire for me to, the whole topic of this is creation, startups and all that. If my desire and if my calling is, okay, I have to build whatever I'm creating in a certain way, there is no playbook to kind of say, okay, if you do this, then you are called a conscious startup. But it's an inner journey that one has to take to, like how Sameer also said, that silent your mind. The quality of your thought needs to be of a certain space that we can end up making certain level of decisions. And these micro exercises are helping in that. So it's like it all ties down in the end to that one single spectrum, that there is no playbook.
See, also there is no, honestly, somebody says, what's the point? I mean, if you don't see the point, then actually there is no need to do it. Yeah. Because this cannot be looked at again. We can't go back to the logically that what can happen. This is a space where you're trying to get away from attachment. You can't look for benefits in that, right? So, my teacher Partho, his favorite example on this is, when you fall in love, I mean, there is no why for it. I mean, somebody can logically tell you the flaws in the person who you are falling in love with, but there is no why. You don't plan and decide. It just happens. So when you fall in love, then you are always craving for that person. You want to be with them. You want to do the stuff. And of course, there is no playbook for how to fall in love, right? Or how to grow in love. When you fall in love, so this is a very similar, but a much more intense journey where you somehow fall in love with this idea of refining yourself. There is no reason for it. As I told you, there was no reason for me to refine my bed. Right? Nobody's seeing it. But it just happened. That's my own quest, right? Of living in perfection, of improving myself and knowing myself. It's a reason and benefits belong to the worldly plane.
Yeah.
That's a different living altogether. To the spiritual plane, consciousness plane, these things have no role to play. You just do it because that's the feeling you get from it. You have the urge to know yourself. Right? You are urged to be better, or whatever. See, because what happens is that when you grow into that state, then you come to a point where you suddenly feel that you are full of love for everybody. And it has no reason. Yeah. You don't love somebody because they did something nice to you. You see a stranger, you somehow, because you start to come to a state in which there are no longer emotions. Emotions are always by somebody. They are caused but this is bhava. It is a deeper state. So they call it prem bhava. You are in a state of gratitude and love for everything. You are karuna bhava, anand bhava, right? So you come to that state, and there is no reason for it. There is no, it's a hetuk, they call it, right? So if you just have, you should only be on the journey if you really feel that you can't do without it. Just there is no reason. I mean, it is going to struggle. People are going to ask you a question that are you becoming a baba? Are you becoming, all kind of stuff will happen to you. So you should only do it because there is no choice left for you. If he doesn't call you in that manner, there is no logical benefit in the material way which one can attribute to. But it does lead to refinement of life, because imagine if you can observe your body and the body becomes refined, right? You will not be able to put anything unsuitable into your mouth.
Yeah.
Which means your health will anyway grow, right? You will not be able to overwork your body. You will need to get enough sleep, because your sensitivity will not allow you. You will not be able to sit in the wrong posture, right?
Yeah.
So your body will actually get refined and more flexible. And actually, I mean, for most people who come into the journey, the aging becomes slow actually.
True.
Similarly, emotionally, you will become much more happy and stable. You won't have the problem of stress. Actually, stress and body health is very interrelated.
We have seen that in Supermorpheus get-togethers all the time.
And your mind will become so clean and undistracted, and you will have the best of the idea, best of the solutions, right? So actually, whatever externally you do, your relationship, your own body, your work, everything will improve. But still, you cannot do it for that reason. Because if you have a reason, if you have an agenda in this journey, then the journey won't happen. You have to do it without an agenda, basically. So it's a sort of a paradoxical situation that you just do it because you love to do it. There is no other reason. There are benefits of it, but you can't do it for the benefit.
Yeah, you can't have a story ready scripted in your head that, okay, I'm gonna get into this hero's journey, and in the end I'm gonna emerge and fight the dragon, and all of that will happen. That story
That's a
can
trap. That's a trap, because you are coming in with an agenda and attachment. That itself means the journey won't happen, because you need to drop everything.
Yeah.
Like there was somebody asked Buddha in his last days, like, can you summarize your teaching in one line? And he just did like this, his hands like this and this and like this. This is a gesture of letting go. He said he didn't even have to talk, basically. Because we all, there is a very interesting story which says, when there are monkeys in the jungle, so they are free and nobody can catch them actually, because they'll climb up the tree, right? So the guy who wants to have domesticate a monkey, they come to the jungle and they find a tree jiske andar ek chhed hota hai, basically, right? Small hole. So they put peanuts into it, mungfali. And the monkeys, they love mungfali, right? So they will come and put their hand and they fold their hand. Now their hand won't come out of the hole, basically.
Yeah.
And then the guy walks to them. Now imagine this guy can see that I'm going to get trapped, and he can leave, but they won't leave. Why? Because attachment. Right? This is exactly the story of all of us. We are all attached to we put two hands into the world, and we are holding on to identity, family, company, money, all of that stuff. So even though the path of freedom is there for everybody, but what's stopping us? Only our own attachment, nothing else. We do not wish to let go of our image, our whatever it is, basically, right? And we have certain ideas we don't want to let go. We want to control.
Yeah.
Any sort of control you want to exert, this journey won't happen, basically.
True.
You have to completely surrender, let go.
Surrender is one big word.
No, it comes through observation. Actually, observation is I'm telling you, it's really the only practice one needs to do. Everything else happens on that path, basically. Because see, what happens when you observe, you start to make out. It's a very interesting thing that basically, if I can observe my body, my mind, and my emotions, after a while, it will strike me that if I can observe my body and my mind, my emotion, then I am not any of them. Right? Whatever you can watch, that is not you. Then who am I? Right? So then you realize that there is a fourth principle, which is the higher consciousness. Right? And you begin to operate from that space. So you start trusting that higher consciousness over and above your own mind-body emotional complex, right? And that's the surrender. Basically, surrender means instead of operating from my old mind, I operate from my new mind, which is the infinite mind, right? So observation से ये सब अपने आप ही हो जाता है basically. मतलब it doesn't have to do anything. See, again, surrender is also an outcome of observation. Just like mindfulness, it's not something which you can do basically. Because what does surrender mean? So basically, you trust somebody. Let's when you go to people do all this sort of adventure sports, right? Paragliding or parachute jumping. You can only do when you trust that company and the person and the equipment, right? So that's sort of a surrender, basically. But it is not a blind surrender. It's like you have either somebody is recommended or you have gone and sort of verified yourself. So you can take your time to verify. So observation allows you to verify all these things. See, none of this is to be believed because somebody is saying it. You have to be able to do it for yourself, right? So when you observe, you will observe that there is a higher consciousness within yourself. And see, I'll tell you when I started to, so what happens when you observe, after a while, the observer begins to guide your life. So you have your own old mind, which is telling you what to do, and you have this new voice. Now, my teacher said that you can believe in this new guy and just follow it. I could not. I had a very good life. I had no trauma. I had a good business, good family. I said, what if this new guy screws up? Right? So what I did was I basically just watched for 2 weeks. What is this guy saying? I didn't implement, but I remembered. Right? And then I would verify in the hindsight. What if I had followed his advice, right? And then it turned out that whatever advice it gave, it seemed to be very profound. And then I said, okay, I want to try, but I can't risk my work life. It's too important. I can't risk my family friend life. Let me try it in my personal life, where I'm the only one involved. That's the lowest risk pilot I can do, right? That is why the first place I started was driving alone, right? So you can always create your own strategies. How do you sort of, in a sort of a methodical, scientific way, slowly begin to observe and then test the effect of observation on your life? So I took almost a year to basically just keep testing and piloting before I gave it full freedom, right? Which is when we shut down Morpheus, basically, because my trust in this new consciousness had become so big that when it said shut it down, I mean, logically it wouldn't make sense to me, but I just went with it, basically. So when your trust grows in anything or any individual, then you will just follow their ideas and advice, basically. So surrender is something which happens and see, another thing is this journey, one has to be willing to let it grow and build at its own pace. One should not have any impatience. Keep फटाफट हो और outcome आए और ये वो मतलब, and so with patience you keep doing it takes off basically in 6 months to 1 year you start to live in a completely different consciousness.
And so beautifully explained that it is a journey of the way I perceive it, Sameer. I don't have an answer to it. I know that it's a mystical element, right? Once it awakens, it just never shuts down.
Yeah. No need of an answer. You just need to continue to work, basically. That's all.
Exactly. There is no option but to surrender, like to the whole process of it.
Yeah.
And we've seen examples, I've seen great examples in Supermorpheus and many other people that have been able to surrender to that state of, yes, there will come a time of confusion. And that confusion is the evolution, right? It's part of the evolution that is taking place at that point of time. And I think we'll just have to surrender to that state of, even today, many of us, like I remember last time when we had the conversation, there was this girl who was talking about, I keep thinking about my business idea. I'm just stuck on the whole that I don't want to screw it up. And then at the same time, I have this desire to, keep chanting and keep doing all of that. All of that collectively that is happening. A lot of it is out of our control.
Yeah.
We'll have to get into the state of saying, hey, if it is leading me to, like even in your example, the idea of, okay, intuition aata kahan se, that ignited this whole journey that you've partaken.
Yeah.
Nobody
See, at a broader level, you see, it's investigation into truth, basically. Because you this idea, right, where can I control something?
Yeah.
If you start to investigate, you will realize that you cannot control anything.
True.
Like in my body, can I control my bodily functions? Can I control how my atoms are working? Nothing I can control. So So something has to push you to investigate truth. And you can take any direction. I went into intuition, somebody might go to control, somebody will go to education. It doesn't matter, because investigation of reality in different aspect, whatever that investigation, and it becomes such a fire, it consumes you basically. There's nothing else you can do. And another thing which helps in this journey, at least to help me, is if you're surrounded by people who are on a similar journey, right? Because then we can collectively grow and support each other. And, like whatever situation I'm facing, somebody else might have faced before, or we can collaborate and do stuff. So that is another thing which I think really helps to have a close community and a group of similar minded people who are consumed by this thing, basically, right? See, for me, I don't want to build a company. I want to build a company which will be based in consciousness. That's all my conditions, right? Whatever I do, my friendships, my time, the books I read, everything has to be filtered by consciousness. That's my only thing, because I wish to grow in life, right? And whatever is conscious will help me grow. So that is the only clarity you need, basically, and everything else will just open up.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful, Sameer. I mean, you're one great example. When I also started doing this, right? The whole idea was that
I
I
cannot
don't
hear.
link up to. Am I audible?
Now I can.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, the whole idea for this to also start, at NeoYug primarily was to just get the creators together and say, hey, there are possibilities, right? And I'm glad, I really want to vouch for Supermorpheus podcast now. Please do that, because we need such stories. Like, there's so many stories at Supermorpheus only that I wish people would just come out of their spiritual closet and say, hey, this is what I believe in. Because for many of us, there will be an idea of, okay, I'm seen, or there are people out there that have built it, who have done it, who
Yeah.
hold the same mindset.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
need such stories. And I think we really look forward to the podcast that Supermorpheus comes with. And we need such more stories.
Yeah, yeah.
Sameer,
We
yeah,
recorded the first episode. Hopefully, we'll release it soon. It's in
please.
the
I think we'll send the link to the entire community here also. Thank you so much, Sameer, for your time. You are a secret, I won't say guru might not be the right word, but like a guide to many of us silently. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid here,
Yeah.
but it just comes from deep respect.
No, no.
Um,
We are all students in different stages of the journey, and
yeah.
this is part of growth and sharing with each other. So basically, and nothing which I've said is, of course, my own. Right? Is everything either come from somewhere, I've heard from somewhere. So basically,
Yeah.
all you
We're
can
all just good
pass it on.
antennas. You've just become a good antenna now.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sameer, for your time.
Thank you.
Now we can open up quick. I think we can take 2 questions from the community if there are any. If any one of you have the questions, you can type it in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. We'll unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question to Sameer. Yeah. If any questions that's out there, otherwise, the name of the book.
I have pasted the link here, Integral Education. You see above, I have put a link for Amazon.in. Can you see that? Sangeeta?
Yeah. Can we repaste it again?
It's not here. It's not in the chat box.
Oh,
No.
ruko. I think I ended up sending in somehow it went to the private message. Yeah. I'll.
Sure.
We have Meenakshi and Supriya. That's Meenakshi. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Hello.
Hi, Meenakshi.
Hello. Sameer, can you hear me? Hi, Natasha.
Yeah, I can.
Yes. Sameer, I just wanted to know how can we handle conflicts? Like if we are doing something logically, we know that it is wrong. But at our emotional part, we understand that we should not do it. So how can we handle that conflict? If you
See, the thing is, you have to basically emotional conflicts are a pretty serious thing, right? So the force of an emotional conflict is very strong. That is why even though we know shouldn't do it, it happens, right? So we need to develop a practice of observation where we can sort of see there is a particular way of life which we have been programmed in, right? So that momentum continues to grow, right? So we wish to change it, right? So what we need to do is begin to step out and watch yourself. And as you start watching yourself in simple situations and you learn how to change your own behavior, slowly you will be able to do it in a complex situation as well. So that's why I said, if you start with, let's say, watching yourself while you are going for a walk, let's say the morning, right? So what you will see is while walking, you might see that, hey, you know what? I'm keeping my shoulders like this. I should keep like this, right? So it's a change in your behavior which comes through observation, right? So once you can make smaller changes, then you gain the strength to make larger changes, which basically means next time when you are, let's say you are getting angry at somebody, right? And you are aware of it, right? So in the first time, the anger will still happen, but you will be aware of it. But next time, you might catch yourself in the middle of the anger and you might stop because you start to see the uselessness of anger. And the third time, you might see the trigger of the anger within your own consciousness. You might catch it at that stage, right? So it's a process which you have to make it part of your life. There is no prescription that here are the 3 steps to stop emotional, and also depends upon who you are with, because we have relationships which are very close range, which are with our partners, our children, and our, let's say co-founders, that are very sticky basically. So there the behavior, and then there are medium range and there are long range, right? So the final ones are harder to do, but if you keep observation going slowly and slowly, you can see a change. I mean, it's a process. If you wish to do it of your own self, you have to make a half an hour a day of observation practice, basically you observe yourself, and see what changes are happening. And if you consistently do it for 21 days, believe me, you'll start to see change. And if you want any support in the process, you can ask Nathasha, we can chat offline. And you only need support for like a month, basically. And within that time, you'll gain the idea of how to do it on your own, basically. And then the journey just continues, basically.
Okay. Thank you, Sameer. Thank you.
Thanks, Meenakshi. We have Supriya next. Supriya, you can go ahead and ask yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Sameer.
Hi.
Actually, I stay in Hong Kong, and first of all, it was lovely just hearing your story, because I also had to take recently a decision like this. I run a business in Dubai, and my family shifted to Hong Kong, and it was a very tough decision. I think, till date, just before I heard your talk, I was still in that confusion that, of coming back. So, this time when I landed to Dubai, I just had this, as you said, that, there was something in me that guided me to say that stop it right now. Don't continue in Dubai and be with your children. That was an insight. And it's so difficult. I just want to thank you and New York to start something like this, because it's really difficult to even sit and talk to somebody that you get these insights. Being a business owner, being a management consultant, and a lot of times I start even doubting my own self that am I sane to get these insights, and or is it my hallucination? So first of all, I just want to congratulate that. Thank you so much for taking out the time and sharing that with us. My question is that now I'm in a phase where this is definitely clear, more than what I also heard you saying, that I also feel that this is my story right now, that I do need to take a pause, but I am definitely looking for understanding some conscious startups to invest in, because definitely I'm quite clear that I would want to continue as my journey to understand business, because I come from a purely service background, right? So I've never seen anybody in my family running a business successfully. especially women, like not even service. So I would love to understand what could be the next steps to just be in the community of either yours or New York, where not in a rush, but definitely see some investment opportunities where, I can at least start exploring, uh, how to learn, first of all, to, support a startup financially or even resource wise. And how can we, like, how can I take that next step?
So I've just mentioned my email on the chat.
Okay.
You
Okay.
drop me a line, we can talk offline. Maybe Natasha can also join us. See, basically,
Sure.
this is
Sure.
exactly the Supermorpheus community is all about. Like
Okay.
1,200
Yes.
people with
Yeah.
diverse startup backgrounds. Some are founders, some are supporters. And
Good.
our idea is to collaborate together to build this kind of startup, right? So there are many
Yeah.
opportunities to support uh, with your knowledge and network itself,
Yes.
right? And financial opportunities. So we within Supermorpheus, we run a fund basically, which is
Okay.
designed in the same manner. So we have a investment practice within Supermorpheus also, in which we have a portfolio of
Mhm.
about 100 companies now, where we
Okay.
to find
Okay.
such.
Interesting.
So there can be we can
Yeah.
speak offline on that, and
Definitely.
maybe we can three
Definitely.
of us can have a conversation
Yeah,
offline.
I would love to. I would love to understand, because
Yeah,
that's what, like, I felt that I want to explore that.
yeah. And
And
you can
I
also
also
see our
also
website.
am
Our website also has some information on this.
sure, sure. I'll check that, because
Yeah,
I also have a farmhouse back in India, and I was just thinking that maybe I need support there, and maybe to convert that into a retreat kind of thing.
yeah,
And how can I now focus my energy into something that expands in me, as you rightly said, right? That do more of something that expands
absolutely, absolutely.
you.
See, we can
Yes. So
see because we can. So my sort of one of my personality traits is of this aggregator or a connector basically. So
correct,
you know so
correct.
so so there are many people in the community actually who have farm/land projects going on where they
Okay. Okay.
do it consciously. Some of them are making their own place, some of them are making a collective place. So I can, and we actually have a group also, farming group, which basically people who own land and do stuff. So we can connect you to right people, and you can
Okay.
find collaborators and inspiration and a lot of stuff within the community basically.
I would love to do that. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. I just wanted to say thanks to you and New York. I think I've been following I think I've just drunk all your videos. So, congrats to Natasha for
yeah.
doing this. It's amazing. And thank you.
Good, good.
I'll stay in touch. Sameer, I have this email address.
Yeah,
I'll reach out.
definitely
Please
will come.
reach out. I mean, all the
Thank you.
collaborators that I have now with whatever we are building. So I run a venture studio now. All
Yeah.
my CAs, lawyers, all the collaborators are from Supermorpheus. This is the kind
Yeah.
of, faith I have on the community, because I know the level of consciousness that all these people come with, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
Sameer, Nandini, they beautifully built it. So yeah, please do reach out.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Priya, I'm also from Hong Kong, by the way.
Oh, wonderful, Natasha. Yes, I
Yes.
know that. I heard your video, and it's so surreal to, really actually speak to you like this. But I just loved your journey, and may God bless you with lots of success peacefully. I
Thank you for
really loved your story.
thank you for joining,
Yeah,
Supriya. Take care.
thank
So
you.
we
Take care.
had one
Thank you.
question in the chat box from Shreya that said, while observing, if we feel shameful or insecure with someone, what am I doing or eating or going in a bad state? How do I deal with this? So basically, the whole idea of judgment.
Yeah. So basically, see, this will happen to you if you're already used to this sort of self judgments and self criticism, right? So, so basically, first of all, you should know that this is a trap, that you want to observe without judging yourself, right? If you observe something about your behavior which is not which is incorrect, let's say, the only thing to do is to make a correction. Like I remember, in those days I was reading this Partho's book, and I read that the body, it has three rhythms. One is to sleep and wake up, right? So the right rhythm of sleep and wake up is with the sun, where you sleep with the sunset and you wake up with the sunrise. Second is breathing and posture. So you said most of us do shallow breathing. We breathe even less than 1/3 of our capacity, and we sit in wrong posture. And the third one is sleep and then eating and assimilating and discarding food, right? And when I looked at my life at that time, all of these three were screwed up basically. I used to sleep late. I used to wake up late. I used to eat on wrong times. I was not having any posture breathing. So instantly I became aware of that I'm lacking in all these terms, right? But I mean, at least in my personality, there was I don't have this whole shameful type of gene only. But I became very aware, and over the years, I basically fixed it. Of course, it doesn't mean that I don't have any of that today, but becoming aware, actually, if you really look at it, if you become aware of a shortcoming in your personality, it's an opportunity to understand it and resolve it. So no big deal. And this is something which is not just with you, right? I mean, it's a human nature, to be whatever, right? To eat wrong things. These are habits which have been implanted. Don't take it personally. Just look at it and make a resolution to fix it. And be lenient on yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself. Basically, be lenient and just grow and improve. Don't have to, I mean, this is a trap. I know it can happen, but we have to just watch neutrally and stay away from this and just make the correction as required. Basically, so that's the only thing.
Beautiful. I think we have no more questions in the chat box. Let me quickly check. Yeah. How to balance in between? Is it Nimit? How do I pronounce? Nimit and hardworking.
So, once you become a Nimit, what does that mean? It means that you have offered yourself to Krishna, right? Then you cannot put any more conditions after that. Krishna wants you to work hard. He will make you work hard. If he wants you to relax, he will make you relax. So let him decide. Like, for example, when I left Supermorpheus after 6 years, was a very, very relaxing, very slow life, right? And suddenly overnight we started Supermorpheus, where it became so busy, that the work hard was the only time, right? So these two things don't coexist. When you become a Nimit, you surrender, right? And if he wants you to relax in a 5-star hotel, you do that. If he wants you to work hard, you do that. It's none of your business to decide your life. You have offered it already, so let it be. So whatever needs to be done through you will be done. See, the symbol of surrender is the flute of Krishna, right? So flute is an instrument. Basically, it doesn't decide what it's going to play or is going to get played or not, right? So once you surrender, that's done with it. There's no other condition after that. So let go of this agenda of being hardworking. But believe me, if you're an instrument of Krishna, he will make you work. I mean, because he needs more and more people in his side so that they can go and build a conscious world, actually, right? So actually, Krishna needs, till the time you are not being given hard work, it's probably a preparation stage, basically. But believe me, it will come. The work will come to you. The right kind of work will come to you. But you won't feel it's hard work, because it is being done by Krishna through you. So he's lifting your feet. So you don't need to work hard at all. You just offer yourself. Does that answer your question, Prerna?
Beautiful. We have Ambika.
Yeah. Hi Sameer ji, thank you so much for this nice session. Thank you Natasha. मैं जो अभी आप बात कर रहे थे, मैं उसी में कुछ ऐड ऑन करना चाहूंगी। प्रॉब्लम ये होता है सर कि हम खुद को सरेंडर कर देते हैं। कोई प्रॉब्लम आती है खुद के लिए तो इट इज ओके, वी कैन सरेंडर, वी कैन हैव फेथ इन कृष्णा, हैव फेथ इन गॉड कि ओके जो हो रहा है अच्छी के लिए हो रहा है, एंड वी कैन सी सम पॉजिटिविटी आल्सो। बट जब प्रॉब्लम फैमिली मेंबर्स सफर करते हैं उसकी वजह से, हमारे कुछ डिसीजंस की वजह से, या जिन्होंने थोड़ा बहुत फैमिली मेंबर्स ने कुछ मतलब सेक्रीफाइस किया, जब वो लोग आके बोलते हैं कि नहीं दिस इज द राइट टाइम, अब इसको, फॉर एग्जांपल एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप के ऊपर ही मैं बोल रही हूँ, आई एम ए फाउंडर, तो आई एम गोइंग थ्रू ए लिटिल स्ट्रगल पीरियड, राइट? तो क्या होता है, एक अच्छी खासी जॉब छोड़ के जब आप स्टार्ट करते हो तो बहुत सारी चीजें होती है लाइफ में, तो उसके बाद में क्या होता है कि आई एम हैप्पी विथ व्हाट आई एम डूइंग राइट नाउ, राइट, एंड इट इज गोइंग ऑन कि आई नो कि आफ्टर सम टाइम इट विल हैपन, इट विल वर्क, बट जो ट्रांजिशन पीरियड है दैट इज वेरी काफी डिफिकल्ट रहता है। तो उसमें जब और लोग आके आपको राय देते हैं, दे आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पीपल ऑफ योर लाइफ, यू कांट इग्नोर देम, राइट। तो उससे कैसे डील किया जाए, क्योंकि मैं मॉर्निंग में अपने आप को एक्टिव करती हूँ, अपने आप को बोलती हूँ कि नहीं, दिस इज द बेस्ट टाइम, आई एम डूइंग गुड एंड आई हैव टू डू दिस, फिर आके कोई bombardment होती है कि ओके, तो हाउ टू डील विद दैट, वी कांट इग्नोर देम आल्सो, वी कांट टेक द थिंग्स, बट इट इज ऑब्वियसली आप डिस्टरबेंस में होते हो तो ये चीजें आपको इफेक्ट करती हैं। प्लीज।
क्या है कि आपकी जो करंट स्टेट ऑफ कॉन्शियसनेस है ना, that you are trying to observe this situation and solve it from that state, right? जो आपकी current जो भी आपका wisdom है, right? So what you need to do is you need to become more deeper and more silent, which will automatically take you to a higher level of wisdom, where you would be able to see a solution, which will be a solution which will solve the conflict. Basically its solution, मतलब basically from a higher time you can see a, जैसे मैं आपको जैसे I'll tell you an example that when
Please, sir.
I stopped working, right, I gave up my whatever company we were doing. So my dad was very unhappy with that, and we used to live in the same house, so every now and then he would come and talk to me about that, right? Why don't you work? So basically after a while it would irritate me, so we would get into some kind of an argument. So and then we both started avoiding each other. So it stayed as it is, basically, right? Because he had something in his mind, I had something in his mind. But slowly, as I became calmer, became more aware, after a year or so, became more silent, I suddenly saw what was his worry, basically. His worry was that me and Nandini, we don't have enough money for our future.
Right, same.
ठीक है, अब क्या था कि
People think.
we owned equity in lot of startups. So those startups were promising. So for us, that was money. But for my parents, right? Because parents only understood money as
In
FD.
bank or in liquid. Yeah.
हाँ, तो उनको, they did not understand that startup stock is also money. So we had like 10-15 crore worth of stocks, which basically would exit at some point, right? So the moment I understood, I realized what's the conflict. So next time I met my dad, I said, if you want to really talk about it, we should set up a meeting of an hour. I will explain you. Right? So he went and talked to my mom. They called me. I went down with a whiteboard. So they were like, why did you bring whiteboard in family meeting? Like they're not used to it. So then I wrote down the name of the companies, what is the share. So I told them, see, this is the money we have. I understand that you may not see it as money, but this will come out and blah blah. So we had I said, don't think that we don't want money in life. We know that we want to live a good life, and this is the money we have. And the day we don't have this, we will go out and work. Right? So that 1 hour of conversation cleared the doubts on both sides. And then they said, okay, this is not enough. How will you buy a bigger house? I said, I don't want to buy a bigger house. I'm happy where we are living, unless you want to take me off the will. So they said, no, that's not the case. But don't you want a bigger house? I said, no. I said, I wanted a bigger house actually at some point. But then I realized through my observation that no matter how big a house I have, I'm going to always sleep in a 3x6 bed, or eat in a 6-inch plate. So that desire has dropped off me. So then my mom said, but I would like a bigger house. So I said, honestly, we have a decent enough house. I don't think I'm responsible to get you a bigger house. So she felt a little bad about that. But, see, at that time, we have a decent sized house. It's not that we live in a very minor. I said, whatever else you need, you let me know. So that day we sort of understood each other well, and that conflict went away, right? So because the other side is still living a normal life, right? So they will see from that perspective. But you have to be the one who becomes deeper and wider, and slowly, and some conflicts will take time to go away. If you are convinced about your decision to be an entrepreneur, you be on that thing. But one thing we can do is at least I used to become irritated when people question me. Right? Now I don't get irritated because I understand that from their perspective, what I'm doing is not right. It's like, when my daughter asks me something, which she is 15, or when she was 10, and she said something which didn't make sense, I never got irritated because I knew that her mind has not grown as much. right? So similarly, even in adults, even though everybody might look like we are at the same age, but sometimes some people haven't grown that much. So then you stop getting irritated with them, right? And you sort of, once you stop getting irritated, you start to understand what their perspective is. And suddenly you might realize, see, one of the two things will happen. Either you will realize, just like I realized, this is what I should talk to my parents about, or you will see something which you can talk to them about, so the conflict will disappear, right? Because see, they were looking at bank balance, which was low. I was looking at stock, right? So when you were looking at the same thing, then the conflict disappeared, right? So many times people are looking at different things. Or you might come to a point where you might realize that it is okay for this person to be upset with me, and I still love them. Let them tell me 10 times a day or 1 time a day, it's okay. Or the third thing is that if you stop, see, let's say if I come and tell you 5 times a day you should do something different, right? And you don't listen to me. So either if I really like you and love you, I'll stay friends with you. I'll accept you as your new form, or I might drop out of your life, which is also okay with you, right? But I can tell you from my life that the change which happened temporarily, it did create difference of opinion, but in the long run, I haven't lost anybody in my friendship. In fact, I've gained more people. There were people who I was sort of not talking to for years because of certain incidents. That itself dissolved. So over a
Right.
long period, all of these things will go away. Basically, our job is just to become more calm, become more observant, become more creative.
And not or वो expectations की okay, they will empathize with us, they will
don't
sympathy, वो
drop,
उस
yeah,
expectation को छोड़ना पड़ेगा.
yeah, drop all expectation.
Right.
Yeah. Expectation is what basically is the seed of all conflict, actually.
Yeah, because whenever I will try to give my problem, और मैं just discuss करने के लिए बोलती हूँ, तो वही आता है, देखा, it happens, हमने बोला. Right. So
देखो,
it is.
in the grahast, it's the longest it takes to resolve. That much I can tell you. Basically, even though me and Nandini both have been on the same journey, still it's challenging to resolve our sort of.
Me and my husband both are working together in building RenoSwift. It's a tech-enabled startup in bathroom renovation.
Yeah.
So, but families are, we are from a family. There the government teachers are working, and
Same here.
कोई
Same here. Both my parents were
BSNL में है, हाँ, proper settled. तो उनके लिए ये बहुत ही different है. Yeah, thank you so much, Sameer ji.
You can try to understand their point
Thank
and
you.
Open. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Ambika.
Yeah.
Fear of death.
Do you want to talk about it? Fear of death?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about it. My question is it your own death or death of other people? What are you, or both? What is that?
How to be okay with especially sudden death of people.
Other people. Yeah. See, basically, again, the answer really lies on investigation of the idea of death itself. So you should sort of, in your own mind, first of all, see how do you define death, and investigate if it really exists or not. Like my mentor, he's writing a book called No One Really Dies. Because if you say dies, right, what dies? The body might die. Who are you? See, that's where the observation, when you start observing yourself, you will see that you can observe your body, mind, and emotions, right? Then you know that when the death happens, what dies? Only the body and the mind and the emotional personality disintegrates, but the observer never dies. And this you have to experience for yourself, even for a little bit, right? So when you know that you can't die an observer, then you also know that nobody dies. It's basically the soul, it's like, when you have, let's say you have a car in which you drive a car, and your friend has another car, and the car becomes old. They want to new car. What will they do? They'll drop this car, they'll get another car. I mean, see, my dad passed away 3 years back. Okay. So, and it happened very suddenly. He was at home. We were all at home, and he just had some sort of a trouble, pain and all. 20 minutes, he was gone. But personally, believe me, I never felt anything bad about it, because his body was, he was 70 plus. He had his own ailments and all. And his whole room was full of autobiographies. He was reading Andre Agassi and, whatever else, right? So I felt that he must be very inspired to do something. But his body was not allowing him, right? It's like you want to go to a trip to Leh, but you have a bad car, right? What will you do? You'll say, let me buy a new car, right? So his soul simply took a decision to drop this body and take birth in a new body where he will be able to do much more stuff. So, but to be able to see it in other people, you have to see in yourself. So if you do self-observation, in a few months' time, you will begin to realize that you are something independent of the body. Just like you are something independent of your phone. You use the phone. You are not the phone. Similarly, you will come to start to know in your own experience that you are not the body. You are not the mind. You are not the emotions. These are all, if you see, body is always changing. They say that in 7 years, all our cells change. Thoughts are changing. So who is dying? Is there a single person? Even if you have a friend, right? 5 years back, they were somebody else. So the only thing which is happening is change actually. They are changing every day. Someday they will go from this body, go to a new body. So you have to experience this to get it out of the fear of death. It's a myth basically. It's just the result of misinformation, nothing else.
Beautiful perspective. I mean, ऐसा सोचा ही नहीं कभी कि it is the soul knows everything, right? It is, by the end, it's all the same. It has its own way of working and all that. Yeah, I mean, I'm taking away a lot from this, Sameer, personally. I think today I'm going to be in that space. But I think all of
observation, investigation is the answer to all the questions, basically. You keep going into that deeper and deeper, you will see all the layers of ignorance will start dropping. Because, see, all this knowledge is within us. The observer is within us, our own higher self. We don't have to depend upon any external guru, teacher, book, and all that. All that can support. This is truly your own journey, and you find the intelligence within yourself and trust that and go with that.
Yeah, beautiful. You are your own guru. We have Mohit. Do you want to take up another question? If we are not taking away from
I have time, 15 more minutes.
Mohit, go ahead.
Hi, Sameer.
Hi.
I'm Mohit Guleria. We used to meet up in.
Yeah, that's what I said. The name is so familiar.
So my question is, like, you are saying that observation and introspection is the key.
No. I'm not saying introspection.
Observation.
Basically, see, one of the things on this journey is to be accurate. Introspection is a mental activity. That's not what you're observation, which is the activity of the consciousness, basically. Observation is real time, where you are observing yourself as you are right now. Right? Introspection is sort of some watching a recording of you. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about only observation, real time observation.
Okay. So I was okay. So my question here is, like, is it our, do you believe, like, is it our own 100% our free will, like, if we start observing and so can we improve things, or can we fix things, or are there external influences also, like past life karmas, or other, if you are living in some certain place, are there certain influences, like in our Hindu traditions we have all these Devi Devtas and
See, basically, the thing is, we should talk about, I mean, to know stuff, we should talk about what we directly experienced, right? So, past life, at least, one only knows as a concept, right? We haven't experienced Devi Devta again. But if you look at your own life today, right? I mean, let's say, see, again, investigation of free will, because you have to take an action of yours and see how did that action originate, right? So you will see that, for example, the reason you know about self-evaluation today is because you are on this session, right? But even if you think you came with your own will, but the guest was invited by Nathasha, right? So already one more will is playing. So if you really look into it, you will see that there is no separate action any of us is doing. It's all a web of everything is causing everything else. Like the fact that you are here, you're asking a question, which is making me answer something which might change my own consciousness in some way, right? So you see, all of us are, if you just look at this group, right, as a sample ecosystem, we are all affecting each other, right? Somebody's asking a question, somebody's just being silent, somebody's typing something, somebody's organizing, somebody's playing a role. So we are all affecting each other, right? If somebody were to think just because I'm the guessed I am affecting everybody. That's not true. It's a two-way street, right? So it's a multi-way street. And if you were to extrapolate it or observe it, you will see that everything in the world, is affecting each other. So Buddha used to have the word for the pratyukta samutpanna, codependent arising. Everything is happening because of everything else, right? So when you look at from that perspective, free will in that way it's basically illusion, right? It was not Natasha's free will to invite me. She just said that somebody else chose to introduce both of us, right? Right. So it's not that both of us decided to do the session. There was another person who played a role, right? So if you really investigate into any event which happens, you go into causality, you will see unending layers and layers of causality. There is nothing, no free will basically. The only thing is that there are two sources of action, right? One is action which is being done by influences which are being caused by the world around you, right? Which is your own mind and mind of other people, right? That is one level of consciousness. Let's call it earth consciousness, right? So your actions can either be result of the collective earth consciousness, or if you begin to grow in consciousness, you can start touching the higher consciousness, right? So it's like, my actions are happening because of everybody around me on earth, or my actions are happening because the Krishna within me is starting to act. So there are only two modes of action. One is an action within the earth consciousness, one is the action which is the higher consciousness, right? So the only decision you make at some point is, do I want to take that journey? Like there is a guy called Amal Kiran, very close to Sri Aurobindo and very sort of very advanced as a sadhak. So he also had this question of free will. So then he wrote a very long essay basically on free will. And then he gave it to Sri Aurobindo and he approved it without any change. So what he said was, the only free will, if there is that when you decide to switch from earth consciousness to the Krishna consciousness, that journey when you begin to take. That's the only decision you make basically. But until you're earth consciousness, decisions are influenced by everybody around you. But when you begin to invoke the Krishna, then Krishna is speaking through you, walking through you, doing whatever, then you don't get affected by the people around you. That's the, I don't know if it's clear or not, but that's at least how I look at it. Did just got dropped off because of
I think
the free will of the internet provider.
Oh. No, he's there. He said he's unable to unmute. Where can we unmute Mohit? Yeah,
Thank you, Sameer. Thank you. I was unable to unmute myself.
So you have been given a demonstration of free will or no free will.
Thank you.
When I met Sameer, I asked him, because he was Supermorpheus and Matrix fan and all that. I'm like, are you gonna ask me blue pill or red pill? But there is no pill.
It's all the illusion of the mind.
Yes. So thank you so much, Sameer. Thank you so much for your time. Again, taking away so much, and thank you to everyone who joined in today.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a memorable conversation for all of us here at New York. Thank you so much, Sameer, for your time. To everyone who need to be in touch with Sameer, we'll share the website details and all that. Somebody wants to get in touch with Sameer one-on-one, we should also be able to do that. And yeah,
the website has no contact detail, by the way, but so only the email I put in the chat.
Yes.
Anybody wants to take up the journey and community, you can get in touch with.
Yes, beautiful. It'll be worthwhile for all the serious seekers and creators, entrepreneurs to join Supermorpheus. Go with an intent of giving value, and that's the whole idea, as simple as I can. And we really look forward to the more podcast that's coming out of Supermorpheus, Sameer. We really need it. Thank you so much for your time. I'll hand it over to Natasha now. Thank you, Natasha, for hosting this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Natasha and Sameer, for this conversation that you guys have done. I think it was a very deep, intensive topic, which I feel, only people at that evolution would understand, at that stage would understand. But thank you so much for simplifying it so well that it is easily accessible to all of us, and sharing your anecdotes and your experiences out of it. And I think my takeaway from this is definitely going to be that there is no playbook, there is no book. So identify that what suits you the best and then play with it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sameer and Nathasha. And guys, we'll be bringing more such conversations. So please stay tuned in. Please do go and check out the podcast by Supermorpheus, and we will share the details in the group. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.